Have you ever stepped outside one morning, coffee in hand, only to find your front yard looking like it just survived a monsoon? That was me, 3 weeks ago. The ground was completely soaked, puddles everywhere, and when I touched the hose, it was warm, like someone had just used it. Now, I live alone. No kids, no roommates, no mischievous gnomes watering hidden gardens at night. Just me, my morning coffee, and, apparently, a lawn that decided to water itself. At first, I figured maybe the automatic sprinkler system had gone rogue, but then I remembered something important. I don't even have sprinklers. Just one hose. That's it. And that's when I started noticing other strange things. My water bill, normally pretty steady, had skyrocketed. Not a small jump. We're talking Olympic-sized swimming pool levels of usage. And the only things in my backyard? A half-dead tomato plant and an old, rusted barbecue grill. So where exactly was all that water going? I started asking around. Most of my neighbors were friendly, helpful, even sympathetic. All except one. Karen. And yes, her real name was actually Karen. She'd moved in just a couple of months earlier, and immediately started acting like the self-appointed sheriff of the street. No, she wasn't the HOA president, but you'd never guess that by how she strutted around, clipboard in hand, inspecting lawns like she ran the place. She filed complaints about the shade of green on someone's shutters. Told another neighbor to mow their lawn properly. Even lectured the mailman for parking too aggressively near her mailbox. She was a nightmare. But even then, theft didn't cross my mind, until I saw it. It was a Saturday afternoon. I had just come back from the grocery store. As I pulled into my driveway, there she was, caught red-handed. Wearing a ridiculous floral blouse and a sun hat the size of a satellite dish, she was dragging my garden hose across my yard like it belonged to her. She connected it to a portable pressure washer and started blasting down her front porch. No shame. No asking. No warning. Just casually helping herself to my water, broad daylight, like she owned the place. I sat in the car, stunned. She looked up, smiled like we were old pals, and shouted, "Hope you don't mind. Just a quick rinse." Before I could say a word, she turned away and kept spraying. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, torn between confronting her or pretending I hadn't seen anything. I chose the latter. Went inside. Stared at my faucet like it had betrayed me. Later that day, I decided to knock on her door. Tried to be polite. I asked if maybe she needed help fixing her water line. She laughed. "Oh no, I just like your hose better. The pressure's fantastic." Figured it's all community property, right? Community property? What was she even talking about? This wasn't a commune. The water didn't come from some shared magic well, it came out of my pocket. I calmly explained that I didn't appreciate her using my hose without permission. She just smiled, tilted her head, and said, "I'm sure the HOA wouldn't mind. We're supposed to share and be neighborly." Then she shut the door in my face. Now, here's something you should know about me: I'm not the type to yell. I don't escalate. I solve problems. So I tried the civil route. I emailed the HOA. Attached pictures, my inflated water bill, and asked for clarification on this supposed community property claim. A few days later, I got their official response: "Thank you for your concern. At this time, we encourage all neighbors to resolve minor disputes amicably, without HOA intervention." In other words, you're on your own. Fine. So I tried again. I bought a hose lock. Simple fix. If she couldn't access it, she couldn't use it. Problem solved, right? Wrong. The next morning, the lock was gone. Not unlocked. Gone. Someone had cut straight through it with bolt cutters. I stood there staring at the sliced metal like I'd stumbled onto a crime scene. I even looked for fingerprints, not that I'd know what to do with them. But in my gut, I already knew. And sure enough, there she was, across the street, once again using my hose. This time to wash her SUV, like she was filming a commercial. Water flying everywhere. Like it was free. Like it wasn't draining my bank account. I confronted her again, this time, less polite. I asked about the lock. "Oh, that thing," she said. "It was a safety hazard. Someone could trip. I took care of it." Then she flipped her hair and went back to scrubbing her tires like it was the most natural thing in the world. I went back inside. Sat down. And stared at the wall in disbelief. The HOA wouldn't help. Karen was untouchable. And I was footing the bill for her weekly spa treatments, courtesy of my garden hose. That afternoon, I posted the new footage to our neighborhood Facebook group, this time with a much snappier title: "Local Karen Turns Neighbor's Hose into Personal Water Park." Within hours, the comments flooded in. Everyone had a Karen story, but mine clearly hit a nerve. People laughed, mocked her, suggested outrageous punishments, even threw in legal advice. Some were furious, not just at her, but at the HOA for standing by and doing nothing. The post started gaining traction beyond the group. It hit Reddit. It hit YouTube. Strangers from other states were tagging their friends and laughing at her. And yes, Karen noticed. The next morning, I watched her from my window. She was standing in her yard with two members of the HOA board, pointing directly at my house, flailing her arms like a soap opera actress. At one point, she even pretended to wipe away a tear. A few hours later, I found a letter slipped into my mailbox, a formal warning from the HOA, accusing me of unauthorized surveillance and hostile behavior toward a fellow resident. I nearly laughed out loud. Hostile behavior? I hadn't even raised my voice. Apparently, filming someone stealing my water was more offensive than the theft itself. That was it. I was done playing by the rules. If the system wouldn't help me, I'd build my own system. I started brainstorming. Alarms? Fake warning signs? Mild pranks? Nothing felt satisfying enough. I wanted justice, poetic justice. Something that would leave a memory, not just a mess. Then, fate delivered. Driving past a construction site near the edge of the neighborhood, I saw a crew setting up a temporary sewage tank. And not just any tank, this one was industrial grade. The kind used for porta potties and waste containment. And just like that, the idea hit me. Terrible. Brilliant. Beautifully satisfying. I pulled over and casually struck up a conversation with one of the workers. Told him I was a homeowner dealing with drainage problems, just doing a little irrigation experiment. He laughed, shrugged, and after a bit of small talk, and a discreet tip, he agreed to let me access the tank for one night only. As long as I didn't mess with the pump, he didn't care what I did. That was all I needed. Back home, I pulled out my toolbox. I rigged a small adapter that connected the spigot to a second hose, which I ran underground, hidden behind some bushes, and straight to the sewage tank. From the outside, the hose looked perfectly normal. But anyone who turned it on expecting clean, refreshing water, well, let's just say they were in for something else entirely. I ran a test using a sealed bucket, just to be sure. The smell alone could knock out a horse. Mission accomplished. Now, all I had to do was wait. That night, under cover of darkness, I set everything in place. Camera rolling. Hose in its usual spot. Trap armed. And just like clockwork, the next morning, around 10:30, I heard it. The soft hiss of the spigot. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed. There she was. Dragging the hose across my yard, business as usual. No hesitation. No shame. She connected it to a brand new rotating sprinkler, one of those high-end ones that spin in a perfect circle, and set it right in the middle of her front lawn. She turned the spigot. At first, it gurgled, then sputtered. She tilted her head, confused. Then, it hit. A jet of thick, brown, putrid liquid blasted from the sprinkler. It shot across her yard, splashed her patio, and most importantly, soaked her bright white wicker furniture. The sprinkler spun again. Once. Twice. By the third rotation, she was screaming. Loud enough for me to hear through the walls. She ran toward the spigot, slipping in the sludge as her pristine lawn turned into a swamp. Neighbors started peeking outside. One man dropped his coffee. Someone started filming. Karen wrestled the hose like it was trying to kill her. She yanked it from the sprinkler, but not before another foul blast covered her legs. She was soaked. Covered. Coughing. And best of all, there were witnesses. Real, live witnesses who saw everything unfold. I watched it all on my screen. Every glorious second. This wasn't just revenge, it was art. Later that afternoon, I stepped outside pretending to check my mail. Karen saw me. Still wearing soggy sandals and covered in filth, she stormed over, yelling about lawsuits, biohazards, and legal threats. I didn't say a word. I just smiled and said, "You told me to do something about it." So I did. Her face flushed red, then green, then red again. She turned and stormed off, shouting about calling the HOA. I waved and added, "Be sure to tell them this time the water wasn't stolen." That night, the footage made its way online, not by me, but probably one of the neighbors. The video exploded. Karen was now internet famous, and not in a good way. By the next morning, everything had changed. People weren't whispering anymore. They were laughing. Her sprinkler meltdown spread like wildfire. Someone even added dramatic music and slow-motion shots of her reactions. It hit Reddit, TikTok, and even Facebook mom groups with titles like, "When Karens Get What They Deserve," and "Neighborhood Justice at its Finest." But that was just phase one. Because I knew Karen. And Karen wasn't done. The sewage fiasco wasn't going to teach her a lesson, it was going to push her deeper into full-on revenge mode. I could feel it. And I was ready. That afternoon, I received another envelope, this time looking extremely official. Inside was a letter printed entirely in capital letters, full of legal buzzwords and empty threats. Karen accused me of sabotage, personal endangerment, and even biological assault. She claimed her dog had gotten sick from the incident, despite my footage clearly showing the animal nowhere near the sprinkler zone. Honestly, I almost felt sorry for whatever lawyer she had, if she actually had one, because no professional reading the full story would take her seriously. Still, I didn't ignore it. In fact, I took the letter as confirmation of something I already knew: Karen wasn't done. So I started planning phase 2. This wasn't going to be another prank, this time, I wanted something smarter. Permanent. The ultimate shutdown. First, I reinforced my security system. I added 2 new motion-sensing cameras along the side of the house, and one right above the spigot, disguised inside a fake birdhouse. I wanted full coverage from every angle, in case Karen decided to get clever. Then I went back to the construction site, just to thank the workers and, quietly, offer them a pizza delivery on me. Keeping them happy meant keeping quiet access to the sewage tank a little longer. They still thought I was running fertilizer flow experiments. I didn't correct them. Back home, I upgraded the hose system. The first version required manual setup and good timing. But this time? I added a remote-controlled switch in my garage, connected to a valve splitter hidden underground. At the push of a button, I could toggle between regular water and sewage line, seamlessly. It was overkill. It was beautiful. And to top it off, I recovered the entire setup with fresh sod. Everything looked perfectly normal from the outside. Now if Karen tried to steal water again, she wouldn't know what she was getting. It was like Russian roulette, with a hose. But then, something unexpected happened. Karen vanished. Not physically, she was still living across the street, but for 2 full days, she didn't leave her house. Curtains drawn. Car unmoved. No hose theft. No shouting. No HOA-style patrols. It felt eerie. Like the calm before a storm. And sure enough, on day 3, it hit. A notice from the HOA showed up at my door. Not a warning. A fine. An actual fine. The charge? Violating community health protocols and intentionally creating a hazardous environment. The amount? $600. I stared at the paper in disbelief. I called the HOA office and got passed around from board member to board member. Finally, someone admitted the truth. Karen had filed a formal complaint, complete with photos and 2 so-called witnesses, claiming I had staged a chemical attack. I didn't even laugh. It was too absurd. I offered full footage, timestamps, and documents from the construction site proving that the hose had never left my property. They told me they'd review it at the next board meeting. That meeting? Scheduled for next month. Karen had played her hand perfectly. She knew the HOA moved slowly, drowned in red tape. And she was using that system like a shield. But she made one critical mistake. She assumed I'd wait. That I'd pay the fine or sit quietly until they cleared my name. What she didn't realize? While she was hiding behind paperwork, I was building my case. Over the next few days, I dug into public records. I studied the HOA bylaws. Even made a trip to the county clerk's office. This wasn't obsession, this was precision. And then, I found it. Buried deep in the fine print, Section 4.2b. It clearly stated that any resident caught trespassing and using another homeowner's utilities without permission would face investigation, fines, and potential loss of HOA privileges. Bingo! Karen had been on my property. Repeatedly. I had the proof. The video. The timestamps. Real witnesses, not the imaginary kind she relied on. I printed everything. Bound it. And mailed copies not just to the HOA, but also to neighbors I knew had previous complaints about her. I hadn't just started a fight, I'd started a rebellion. 2 days later, a neighbor named Glenn knocked on my door. Quiet guy. Lived 2 houses down. He said he'd been fed up with Karen ever since she reported his hammock for being too colorful. He thanked me. Said it was time someone stood up. Then another neighbor came by. Then another. Turns out, Karen had made a lot of enemies. I just gave them a spark. Soon, the whole street was buzzing. People were sharing stories, comparing notes, passing around my footage like trading cards. And then, the knockout punch, someone leaked a private HOA meeting recording. In it, Karen could be heard trying to sway the board with guilt trips, lies, and full-blown rants about being targeted by jealous neighbors. The internet had already seen her sewage meltdown. Now, they heard the behind-the-scenes audio. It was a perfect storm. 2 days later, Karen stepped outside. No makeup. No clipboard. Just sunglasses, and a broken expression. She got in her car and drove off without looking at anyone. For the first time in weeks, the street felt calm. But I wasn't naive. Karen wasn't gone, she was regrouping. That's why I left the remote switch active. That's why I kept the cameras running 24/7. Because this wasn't about water anymore. It was about boundaries. And Karen? She had finally learned that mine came with consequences. I stepped back inside, grabbed my folder, neatly printed and full of evidence, and returned to the porch. Everything was in there. Time-stamped video footage of Karen trespassing on my property, on multiple dates, always with my hose in hand. Copies of my inflated water bills. Screenshots from the neighborhood forum. Even a list of other neighbors who had submitted complaints against her over the past year. And right on top, a neon-highlighted copy of the HOA bylaw she had violated, trespassing with use of private utilities without consent. The guy with the clipboard took his time reviewing everything. Karen's face went pale as he flipped page after page. The second board member leaned over, whispered something, and the entire energy shifted. Karen suddenly cut in, claiming the videos were fake. That I had stalked her. That I had created a hostile environment long before the whole hose incident. But this time, the board wasn't buying it. They told us they needed time to review everything and would call a special meeting within the week to address the matter. Karen demanded immediate action. They ignored her. As they walked away, Karen turned to me one last time. Her voice was low, trembling with anger. "I'll make sure everyone knows the kind of person you really are," she said. I replied calmly, "They already do." She stormed back to her house, muttering something I didn't bother trying to understand. That night, I posted a fact-based summary in the same neighborhood forum where the original video had gone viral. No sarcasm. No exaggeration. Just the truth, how she trespassed. How she stole my water. How I tried to resolve it through the HOA. And how I acted when the system failed me. The response was overwhelming. People rallied behind me. One neighbor even offered to mow my lawn. Another left a pie on my doorstep with a sticky note that read, "You're a legend." 2 days later, the special HOA meeting was held. It wasn't public, but word traveled fast. Karen showed up armed with folders full of legal threats and accusations. But it all collapsed under the weight of the real evidence. The board watched the footage, read the bylaws, and issued an official HOA violation against her. She was fined $500 for repeated trespassing, and warned that any future incidents would result in her losing HOA privileges altogether. No one apologized to me directly, but it was clear they were backing away from her fast. Karen had become a liability they could no longer defend. Her fan club? It fell apart almost overnight. The board member who always backed her resigned quietly the next week. Karen, once the self-appointed sheriff of the neighborhood, now walked her dog with her head down. No eye contact. No clipboard. No hose. But she wasn't done yet. Karen filed one last desperate complaint, this time with the city. She claimed I had installed an illegal sewage connection in my yard. Sure enough, a city inspector showed up. He examined the setup, laughed for 5 full minutes, and told me I was completely in the clear. Nothing was permanent. No laws were broken. Off the record, he even said, "I wish more people handled neighborhood drama this creatively." I offered him a bottle of water. He grinned and replied, "Only if it's not from the hose." By then, my video had hit over 4 million views. People were emailing me asking for interviews. One guy suggested I sell shirts that said, "Hose Justice." My neighbors treated me like a local hero. But I didn't feel heroic, just relieved. Finally, it was over. Almost. Because with people like Karen, quiet doesn't mean defeated. It means waiting. So I left the valve system in place. I kept the cameras rolling. And I set up a brand new hose, shiny, coiled, and just tempting enough to act as bait. Not because I thought she'd try again. But because if she did, I'd be ready. Nearly a month passed since the great sewage incident. Karen's house, once the center of noise complaints and HOA drama, now sat dark and silent. No porch lights. No music. No stolen water. For the first time in what felt like forever, my mornings were peaceful. No outrageous water bills. No confrontations. No feeling like a trespasser on my own land. Neighbors greeted me with real smiles now, not just polite nods. People who once ignored Karen's behavior now went out of their way to say hello. One even invited me to a backyard barbecue. And someone, I still don't know who, left a gold-colored hose nozzle on my porch like a trophy. No note. Just a silent nod to poetic justice. Online, the saga kept growing. People made memes. One guy created a parody opera synced with footage of Karen getting drenched. Someone else turned it into a graphic novel animation. Even strangers were messaging me, saying things like, "Thank you for standing up to HOA madness." I didn't ask for any of it. But yeah, it felt good. Still, I never fully let my guard down. Karen had gone quiet, sure. But quiet doesn't mean she's gone. It just means she's regrouping. Then, one evening, just after sunset, an envelope appeared under my door. No name. No postage. Just a handwritten note: "You may have won this time, but this neighborhood won't be yours forever. I'll be back. Stronger." The handwriting was unmistakable. Karen. Dramatic. Vague. Completely ineffective. The next morning, a moving truck pulled up in front of her house. No warning. No goodbyes. Just workers packing her patio furniture and that hideous pink flamingo she kept by the mailbox. By the end of the week, the house was for sale. Days later, a young couple with a toddler moved in. They introduced themselves, brought cookies, and politely asked, "Is it okay if we use our hose hookup?" I nearly cried from the normalcy. But the story didn't end there. A week later, I got an email. From a guy named Devin. He lived in a different HOA across town. Guess who his new neighbor was? Yep, Karen. She was back to her old tricks. Complaining about wind chimes, cats, and yes, stealing someone else's hose. Devin found me through the viral video and asked if I had any advice. I sent him everything: blueprints, camera recs, even a file titled, "Karen Defense Protocol." He replied with 3 words, "This means war." I didn't hear from him for a few days, then he sent footage. Karen got sprayed again, this time with compost tea and expired fertilizer. Natural. Safe. Utterly disgusting. And best of all? It happened in front of a group of kids. The clip hit the internet like a freight train: Karen's Revenge, Part 2. That's when I realized something. Karen wasn't just a problem. She was a traveling circus of entitlement, infecting every HOA she touched. But now? Thanks to the internet, people were ready. After that, I started a small blog. I told neighborhood horror stories, HOA nightmares, and tales of suburban madness. I never named names, but everyone knew who Hose Queen was. It blew up fast. I even sold t-shirts, HOA before brothers. Justice flows. But that wasn't the best part. One afternoon, while trimming hedges, I heard it: laughter. The new family who bought Karen's house was playing in their yard, chasing their toddler through a sprinkler. Their own hose. Their own water. Their own happiness. And no one was stealing anything. No one was being threatened. No one was scared of a clipboard. That was the real win. As I stood there, watering my tomato plant in peace, I thought, who would have guessed a garden hose could take down a tyrant, unite a street, and start a movement? Ridiculous. Poetic. Perfect. I turned the spigot. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like home again.